Policing, 1973, Brooklyn, New York. In 1973, in Brooklyn, New York, four young men in their mid-20s went to John and Ale's sporting goods store for a robbery that escalated in a fatal shooting in a hostage situation. John and Ale's store sold a variety of weapons and ammunition. The four men, Shulab, Dawood, Yusuf, Shali, browsed the merchant and along with a dozen other shoppers that were spread throughout the store. The men decided to steal guns for self-defense and to protect their families over a Muslim religious dispute. The day before, 7 Sunni Muslims were killed because they left their sect. 4 children drowned in front of their father. 1 child and 2 adults was shot. The 4 gunmen were taking actions, and they feared for their lives and the lives of their family for the Muslim Black Mafia, who were very violent at the time. The hostage situation turned the sporting goods store, stocked with guns and ammunition, into a fortress that lasted 47 hours. In addition to the gunsmen, there were 12 other people in the store that became hostages, 11 shoppers, and 1 was the store owner. 2 people in the store were able to get away before the trouble began. A high school teen slipped out of the door and started to call 911. The police surrounded the store in every direction within minutes. One of the store owners escaped from the side door after the gunmen started shooting. Shooters started firing at the time, and it escalated the situation. Roughly 500 policemen came out in full force, and many randomly shot at the building. The scene was described as a war zone. One of the officers killed, another shot at the knee, and one of the gunmen was shot at the stomach. The police took aim from behind dumpsters, cars, subway pillars, chimneys, and signs. They shot out the street lights in operation to work in the dark. The New York Police Department Special Ops team set up a squad of armed truck and laid down heavy fire in efforts to grab the gunsmen. The bloody exchange kicked off a 3-hour firefight. Hundreds of the community onlookers lined up on the sidewalk. Any locals were trapped in their apartment over the weekend. Some waited to be evacuated in the cover of the tank-like vehicle in New York Police Department borrowed from the Department of Defense. At first, they were curious and entertained, but it didn't take long for the coward to have a different opinion. Hundreds of the crowds wanted the gunmen to start the fight, while the other half wanted the policemen to rush in and shoot. Either way, everybody wanted blood. The media played a key role in this violence. They combined the street looking for eyewitness and added to the trouble every time the camera came on. When rumors started about the gunmen being part of the Black Mafia, the crowd wanted to start throwing bottles at the police and breaking windows. The gunmen held 11 hostages inside the store. The 47-hour crisis was one of the longest hostage siege in New York Police Department history. One of the hostages situation is not well known. Its unintended consequences help us to understand the policing and negotiation today. In the 70s, New York police responded to these situations by telling people they are going to surround immediately. If they didn't comply, the police would surround the building and use brutal force to capture the individual in any way they could. This method responded in injury, killed innocent bystanders, hostage, and police officers. After community members protested in response to officers threatening to drive a tank into the store, the police commissioner implied a negotiation technique introduced by the New York Police Department head of psychiatry, Harvey Schosberg. After a lengthy conversation among the law enforcement and the government official, it was decided that Schosberg's technique to talk to the gunsmen was the best way to de-escalate the crisis. This change involved common conflict resolution practice as an alternative method based on the community and collaboration. The police commissioner supported the idea, turning the officers away from violence. Later that year, the New York Police Department hostage negotiation team was founded, and a tactical use at a John Ailes would be becoming guidance principle. In the light of today, community policing, the Deputy Commission and Community Affairs stated that he believed the gunmen would be heroes if the police did not kill them. Instead of brutal force, the police used psychiatry, patience, and firearm discipline. The police stood down as they were told. After the internal 3 hours gun battle, the police did not fire another bullet. The negotiation started with a Muslim minister who spoke to the gunmen through the tank bullhorn. If you want us to leave as Muslims, to go home, fire 3 shots. 3 shots were fired in rapid succession. According to Dr. Schosberg, the shots told the policeman the gunman wanted to talk. He said talking would give the police the insight and the mindset of the gunman and would lead to a reasonable situation without violence. By the next afternoon, 2 hostages had been released, and a third one was let go in exchange for a doctor bringing medical supplies to treat the injured gunman. The doctor picked up the bullhorn and walkie-talkie and took them inside. The gunman had previously ripped the phone lines out of the wall, but used the walkie-talkie to order sandwiches and cigarettes. But Dr. Schosberg's theory that ordering food meant the men did not really want to die of any cause. Some relative of the gunmen were also called into trying to talk them out into peacefully surrendering. While the police were anxious, the situation was often calming. The gunmen were ready to communicate and collaborate. This was the end of the Wild Wild West gun battle, and the first time police in New York City did not fire weapons or even excess brutally forced. Roughly 4 hours into the situation, the store owner persuaded the gunman to let the hostage hide in the floor on the second floor, which the noise of the police trying to drill through the walls from next door. The hostage were able to remove that drywall area and hide in the staircase to the roof and ran to safety. This was a welcoming surprise for the police. Without a hostage as lever, the gunmen were surrounded a few hours later. The gunmen were not criminals or drug addicts. They were working classmen who decided to rob the store for weapons in order to defeat themselves against the Black Mafia Association who threatened them. Sublab worked in a transit authorities. Deward was a college student and an artist. Shali was a TV radio repairman, and Yusef was a carpenter. Their cause was a form of resolution, self-defense, and unique in the 70s. Groupthink played a key role because none of them wanted the confrontation to get to the point where it was. They were afraid, and they knew what they had done by when the police started shooting at them. But each went along with a plan in support of each other. None of the 3 would admit the idea was a mistake. The New York Times headline read, "Muslims say fears for sports goods store raid." They finally surrendered because they believed the police would not kill them as they walked out the door. The conflict resolution style of negotiation was in effect. The movie Hold Your Fire, Undercover, what really happened in this landmark event with the potential resolution of American policing. Where are the gunmen now? All 4 were convicted on 41 counts of murder, attempt murder, kidnapping, and robbery, and were sentenced to 25 years to life. At this time, the media gently handed the story because Sunni Muslim religion was a novel concept. It was awkward situation for the country. In 1998, Youssef was released on parole and died in 2003. In 2010, Sublab was released on parole. He is now a social worker working with youth in the criminal justice system. Duad was released in 2019 and has continued working as an artist. In October 2020, Sula died of a stroke at his 14th parole hearing. The biggest mistake that was made by the police by the brutal force first response. That first gunfight battle lasted 3 hours. The cop did not bother to check whether or not if there was any hostages in the building. They straight fired into the store. The innocent people told the reporters that bullets were flying everywhere, even past their heads. The Wild Wild West shootout caused law enforcement to lose one of their own. Another error was dilly-dallying at the initial level that allowed the standoff to continue for days. Of course, this was well before 9/11, and emergency management was poor in its lacking. The leaders were literally changing policies and planning. The accepted policy prior to change of the New York Police Department was to go in and shoot everywhere. In conclusion, the event was a hostage siege. That is not well known in history, but it was the beginning of the hostage negotiation where the parties choose a peaceful resolution. The New York Police Department learned how to stand down while resolving conflict. This says a lot for the boys in blue in the 70s. It was obvious to the police commissioner that the shootouts were not going to be effective. The gunmen had an arsenal of disposable and were refusing to stop fight. Maneuver the police truly through the gunmen were members of the Black Mafia. Tensions were high all across the city and kept high that way. I believe the decision to call Dr. Schallenberg was an innovative and a smart political move. Dr. Schallenberg's idea of taking the gunmen in an attempt to understand them and their need ending the shootout changed history. Even though the hostage their own way out, the technique using physiology instead of brutal force changed policing forever. A few years later, in 1980, the New York State Special Operations Response Team was created. Today, SORT provides specialized service to communicate with law enforcement agencies that include counterterrorism and hostage rescue. Dr. Schallenberg was the first New York Police Department police officer with a PhD in psychology. His pioneer police psychology. It is interesting to know that Dr. Schallenberg's principles were still used today for investigation and interrogation. I hope you enjoyed this lecture and thank you for your time.